Hi everyone, my name is Matthew Griffin. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm the CEO and founder of the 311 Institute and the World Futures Forum, and I look at the next 50 years. Now, from a multinationals perspective, most multinationals care about the next 20 years, whether that's 1, 2, 3, 5, 10, 20 years. Most governments care about that, but they also care about the next 20 to 50 years, and that's especially true when we start talking about the future of mobility. Because from a government perspective, they need to start making infrastructure decisions today so that they can actually capitalize on all of these new things and all of these new benefits that I'm going to be talking through in this presentation. So when we start having a conversation basically about this particular space, many people talk about the future of transport. It isn't. It's actually about the future of mobility, of getting goods, products, services, and people from A to Z in either the most cost-efficient manner possible or the fastest manner possible. And when we start having a look at the future that's ahead of us, we have a huge number of options. In addition to that, we are going to be disrupting business models, we're going to be disrupting vehicle ownership, and all manner of other things. So let's start stepping through it. Now, this is my favorite car. Basically, it was a concept that was created in 2020. It's a DeLorean DB7, and of course, it's a time-traveling flying supercar. Now, this is what I take, basically, to go and try and figure out what the future looks like. I get in my time-traveling DeLorean, I go into the future, and then, like Marty McFly, I come back and I tell all of you all about it. So I can't wait to actually be able to buy one of these. Apparently, they're coming through in 2022. However, I might be a little bit skeptical on that front, but here's hoping, fingers crossed. Now, when we start having a look at the foundations of the future of transportation as we know it, firstly, everything is going to be autonomous. Now, we have this transition period where we move from things being not autonomous to semi-autonomous, which is roughly where we are now, to fully autonomous kind of category 5 vehicles, really in the sort of 2023, 2024 era. Now, when we do manage to get to a fully autonomous vehicle state, on the one hand, it's believed that accidents will decrease by about 99.5%, which means that we will have hundreds of thousands more people alive to experience the future that we are creating for everybody on the planet. Secondly, we're going to see approximately 30% fewer vehicles on the roads because they're going to be more efficient and they're going to be optimized basically for the routes that they're going to be taking. Thirdly, these vehicles are going to be available as a service. Organizations like Mercedes will provide these vehicles as a service. You won't necessarily buy one. However, if you do want to buy one, there's actually some interesting things coming up, because if I buy a fully autonomous vehicle, then like we see with Tesla with their FSD modes and Elon Musk's aspirations, my car sits on the driveway 95% of the time, but if it's fully autonomous, it can actually become a fully autonomous taxi. And rather than sitting on my driveway, eating up space, it can be going off and earning fares, which can then go into my bank account to help me pay for the car. So there's some really interesting things basically coming through when we actually talk about the future of car ownership, for example, let alone the technologies and innovations that we're going to be talking through. We're also seeing the rise of electric cars. Now, it's estimated that by 2040, all vehicles will be electric. Now, there's a couple of reasons for that. So, firstly, we're seeing sovereign governments all the way around the world, from the US to the UK to Germany to China to Japan, basically to India, actually banning the sale of internal combustion engine vehicles by around 2030 to 2040. Which means that even if you love internal combustion engine vehicles, if you're buying a new car, it's going to be electric. Now, when we have a look at electric, we have a couple of options ahead of us. So we've got battery electric vehicles, which are typically based on lithium-ion batteries that we have today, but also fuel cell electric vehicles that run on hydrogen. Now, when we actually sort of look at BEV versus FCEV, inevitably, in my opinion, BEV is going to win. So while we have Toyota, who are very busy developing fuel cell electric vehicles, they're also betting on lithium ion. We have organizations like Volkswagen, who've recently purchased $48 billion worth of lithium ion batteries, etc., etc., etc. So for my betting, certainly in the near term, basically we're looking at BEV being the winner. However, on screen, what you see here is a unique hypercar from Lamborghini. So it's being developed in conjunction with MIT. It uses structural batteries Now, structural batteries aren't really what you think they are. Structural batteries are the chassis of the car. So in this particular case, the carbon fiber chassis of the Terzo Millennio Lamborghini is interwoven with something called carbon nanotubes. So the chassis is the battery, which then means that this is one of the first batteryless electric vehicles that we're actually going to see. So a little bit of fun trivia for you there. Now, when we actually have a look at the future of energy itself, we have combustion engine vehicles that are based on fossil fuels today. However, basically we see biofuels coming through. We don't really see any biofuel cars, but nevertheless, we do see hydrogen vehicles starting to come through in a variety of different guises, from aircraft to cargo ships and so on and so forth, as well as some supercars. We also see renewables coming through. Now, when we actually have a look at renewables, typically we think of renewables as being used to charge our electric vehicles. But as we see dramatic improvements in the performance of, for example, photovoltaic materials, which are about 17 to 20% energy efficient today, but we have a pathway to 132% energy efficiency, we already have organizations like Hyundai, like Year One, and Toyota that are using photovoltaic materials and coating the cars with these things. Now, what that means is that we actually have solar-powered cars that are commercially available today that, again, don't need batteries. Now, moving sort of a little bit further on, basically, we also see the development of 3D printed lithium-ion batteries. So those batteries are 400% more energy dense than anything that we have today. They also charge 500% faster than today's lithium-ion batteries. We see ammonia, which is highly useful when we start talking about hypersonic aircraft, but also cargo ships and sort of larger vehicles. In addition to that, we have boostable lithium-ion batteries, which are crucial for electric aircraft, particularly when we see them taking off. They've got to have a boost, which is why we call them boostable ion. We also see polymers coming through from the companies like those at the University of Bristol. Polymer batteries can charge your electric vehicle to a 450-mile range within a few seconds. And then, talking of charging, we have wireless energy transmission coming through. And if you have a look at Michigan, for example, as well as BMW, on BMW's case, we already have wirelessly charged electric vehicles coming through, as well as wirelessly charged UPS vans and trucks coming through, courtesy of ORNL over in the US. But when we go back to Michigan are one of the leading cities who are now starting to roll out, at a very basic level, they're prototyping, magnetized and conductible roads. Now, what this means is you can drive your electric vehicle along a road, and a little bit like the same way that we charge our smartphones today, you can wirelessly charge your electric vehicle as it's either driving along the road, and the road can charge it, or the street furniture that's on either side of the road can charge it for you. So when we start having a look at the future of how we charge our electric vehicles, on the one hand, as these wireless technologies start rolling out, again, we see a time basically where we can see the death of the lithium-ion battery, which, by the way, we can now fully recycle thanks to companies like AT over in Europe. So again, we have a variety of opportunities when we start talking about lithium-ion vehicles. We have a couple of problems because we start talking about how we recycle all these different batteries. We have a solution there, but again, we also have a solution to completely remove these batteries from our global electric vehicle fleets. Cars are also going to be increasingly 3D printed. So this is a fully autonomous electric vehicle from a company called Big Rep. It was 3D printed. It has 80% fewer components than a traditional car. It's just a little one-seater. Elsewhere, we also have, with companies like General Motors, we have artificial intelligence that are designing future vehicles and cars thousands of times faster than humans do. And in General Motors' case, they kind of started using artificial intelligence to design new cars that were lighter because those cars have a greater electric vehicle range, and so on and so forth. Plus use less materials, they're easier to manufacture, and so on and so forth. We also have recyclable cars. So this is sort of quite a fun little concept from BMW. They estimate it'll be about 2030 before they start rolling this out. This is a circular economy car. Now, what I mean by that, it's called the iVision iCircular. What I mean by a circular economy vehicle is everything on this vehicle is fully recyclable and fully reusable. So when we start taking sustainability into account, when we have a look at the future of mobility and transportation, there's some really exciting things happening. Invisible cities and invisible cars. Now, thanks to 5G and what we call vehicle to X, basically where vehicle to X is vehicle to infrastructure, particular sort of modes of operandi, as well as protocols. At a very basic level, if you have a car that is traveling ahead of you and it's 3 to 4 cars ahead of you, using V to X or V to V, we can figure out basically when that car brakes, and we can already get your car to start braking. So you don't have to see the vehicle that's 5 vehicles in front of you in order to avoid crashing into the back of it if it's doing a sort of sharp stop. Now, in addition to that, when we start having a look at the sensors on some of these new electric vehicles, whether it's radar, whether it's LiDAR, we also see the development of photonic cameras. Now, photonic cameras are coming out of the US as well as China. They can pick up the very faintest photons, individual photons of light. Now, this is interesting because what it means is that we actually have sensors on the horizon now that will let autonomous vehicles literally see round corners. And what I mean by see round corners is you can also use these photonic cameras to take photos of things that are around a corner. So that's mind-blowing as it is. However, if you consider that we have lots of vehicles with lots of sensors connected to 5G, the cloud, artificial intelligence, and all these other things, then if I'm driving down one street in New York and my car wants to take a sharp right-hand turn, if a pedestrian runs out of that street, but I haven't got line of sight to that pedestrian, the cars around the corner can see that pedestrian, communicate that to my vehicle, and my vehicle can already start slowing down before it goes round the corner in order to avoid running over the pedestrian. So when we start talking about safety improvements in future autonomous vehicles, there's some really quite strange and interesting things coming through. And this creates the concept of the invisible city. It also creates the concept basically of smart vehicles, but it also creates this concept of spatial intelligence, where vehicles basically in other areas of a city gather information on each other, the environment, the people in the environment, the assets and street furniture in the environment, whatever it happens to be, and they can communicate all of that to each other, and so they actually have this kind of spatial intelligence, something that we can't do today. In addition to that, cars in the future can also have a shared hive mind. So for example, if a car in Japan sees a shadow on the road and doesn't know what it is, maybe it's a boulder, and when it goes through it, the artificial intelligence can say, well, it's not a boulder, it's actually a shadow. So it's learned what that thing is. Excuse me. Now, that car can then teach a car in New York that when it sees something similar, it's not a boulder, it's a shadow. So the concept of hive minds basically is increasingly coming to life, basically with the more things that we connect together and the more AI and cloud systems and platforms that they actually hook into. What about this? I mean, at the moment, most people's cars and vehicles are a depreciating asset. You buy it, and if you're not renting it out like a taxi service, it's just not making you any money. But autonomous vehicles, because they are so reliant on artificial intelligence and sensor data and all these other things, they are literally supercomputers on wheels. They are packed full of GPUs. And as any Bitcoin miner will tell you, GPUs are what you need to mine crypto. So now we're starting to see vehicles that come out that, whether they are parked at your home or whether they are traveling through the streets of London, can start mining cryptocurrency as they are traveling around. So all of a sudden we have the concept of cars that can earn you money. This flips car ownership on its head. What happens when UPS vehicles actually mine crypto while they're actually delivering goods and services to people? I bet UPS has never seen mining crypto as a new revenue stream opportunity. Hey guys. Now, when we actually have a look at the future as well, basically we've got this. So when we start talking about being able to get from one side of a city to another, basically at speed, on the one hand, we have hypersonic boring technologies coming through. Now, what I mean by hypersonic, and Google's actually allegedly taken a position in a hypersonic boring company, is you fire a projectile which is on at the head of the mining machine at hypersonic speeds into rock. Now, the reason why this is significant is because you end up with a boring machine that can bore tunnels 10 times faster than anything that we have today, which also drops the cost of making tunnels. And as we know with Elon Musk and the Boring Co., he's already boring tunnels basically around Las Vegas so you can move from one convention center to another at speed. But again, you can use this kind of concept to move around cities. In Sweden, they want to use this concept to move goods around cities. So as opposed to cars, basically we actually have trucks and lorries, or just large container units, basically that are moving from one side of the city to the other at speed. And they reckon that that'll cost them about $40 billion to build. Anyway, when we start having a look at the actual future of vehicles, that's also quite zany. So we have adaptive materials. So adaptive materials can, on the one hand, heat and cool vehicles in new ways. We have dynamic displays. So we already see 8K, 12K, 16K, and even 32K displays coming through. We also see holographic displays coming through with the likes of Samsung. As well as volumetric displays. We have in-car virtual reality. So we're using 5G and augmented reality and virtual reality systems that are rendered in the cloud. If you're traveling through London, for example, the AI can figure out where you are. It can use cameras that are embedded into the side of the car, and it can turn London basically into some kind of zombie shoot 'em up. So all of a sudden, we have ways to really bring the outside, what's happening outside of the vehicle, into the vehicle, basically for gaming and entertainment purposes. And that's before we talk about general streaming. Metaverse compatible, increasingly we're going to see vehicles that are metaverse compatible, whatever that really means, but that sort of kind of means being able to dip into and out of the metaverse, basically in different ways. We have neural interfaces. So today I already have neural interfaces that look like a child's decal that they can put onto your skin and they can read your mind. That's another conversation for another time. But neural interfaces, when you get into a car, the car simply understands basically what you actually want to do, where you want to go. You no longer have to talk to the vehicle, which is a weird concept in itself with behavioral computing. In addition to that, we have phase shifting. So when we talk about phase shifting, we talk about metamaterials. Now, being normal, we have metamaterials basically that can go from soft to hard. So for example, when we start talking about the interior of a vehicle, and companies like BMW are exploring these particular concepts, you can have an interior of a car that is really soft. Actually, I might swip it the other way around. That's really hard. However, in an accident, all those surfaces become really soft. So metamaterials are kind of really weird materials. In addition to that, if you really want to go one step weirder, a company called Hyperstealth over in Canada have developed metamaterials that hide everything behind them. It is a literal Harry Potter invisibility cloak. Now, what I mean by that is you could, if you wanted to, and if the regulators let you, but they probably wouldn't let you, create a car that was literally invisible. And then shape-shifting, adaptive materials again, but we already have a variety of different materials around, but they let us actually transform the shape of our vehicles, whether it's things like 3D printed polymorphic materials, where you just simply click a button and all of a sudden the cabin reconfigures itself, things puff up, things basically deflate. So we've got lots and lots of different options to hand when we start talking about what we can do with the external part of the vehicle and the internal part of the vehicle. Vehicles are also increasingly modular. So for example, this is Mercedes-Benz. We have a standard chassis, and then you simply drop different units on top of it. Toyota have the E-palette. So with the chassis, one day you can have a shop. Secondly, you can have a library. Thirdly, you could have an office. Fourthly, you could have whatever you want. You could have a family car. You could have an SUV. So the idea of modularity is increasingly taking hold with a lot of different organizations around the world. And if you have a fully autonomous vehicle, do we actually already have the death of the car? Companies like Audi, Volkswagen, Mercedes, Toyota already see the death of the car, because if I take the pedals, the dashboard, and the steering wheel out of your car, do you have a car or do you have a pod? you have a pod. And if you have a pod, you have a space. And if you have nothing in that space, you have a blank space, which you can do all sorts of weird things with. So on the one hand, this is the Citroen skate concept. The left-hand side, basically you actually have a Sofitel concept, which is an autonomous hotel room. In the middle, you have I don't know what that is, frankly, but you have whatever that is. Basically, maybe it's sort of like a gondola thing. And then on the right-hand side, that sort of purple thing, that's actually a gym on wheels. So that actually contains a rowing machine. So you order up your autonomous vehicle, it comes to your door, you get in and you row yourself to work, albeit the car is actually transporting you, but you get the point, you're getting a workout. Now, this is from Aprilia, kind of a Sofitel sort of looky-likey. This is the autonomous travel suite. So remember, we've got a pod now. This is a fully autonomous hotel room. And when we start looking at this, if you want to go from one side of America to the other, or from one city to another, you can either take an aircraft, or you could just take an autonomous travel suite. So you can sleep in these when the regulators let you. This is an alternative to air transport. So we can do odd things. I think you're getting the gist. Now, when we have a look at new business models, we have literally the concept of blank space as a service. And I'm going to give you some examples here. Everyone's your competitor in this space. So, for example, Lego basically could actually start renting out some of their fully autonomous vehicles as fully autonomous office spaces. This is a particularly practical design when we start thinking about the lack of office space or meeting rooms, for example, in London. I can never get a meeting room in London. Now, it's probably because no one lets me in and no one likes me, but nevertheless, in the future, I can just rent a fully autonomous office suite from Lego, from Audi, from, I don't know, Rich's Foods, from the US government, I don't know. Anyone can use this concept and then sell it as a service. Get the point. Cashierless shops. If we start collapsing different trends from different sectors together, I have a fully autonomous shop which can come to you as the consumer, but it can be cashierless. So you combine it with sort of Amazon Go. I just walk up to this, I take stuff off, I scan in with my QR code, and the money that I owe the shop is just debited from my digital wallet. My digital wallet could actually be from Toyota, Mercedes, Audi, it could be from Bentley, whoever it happens to be. So we've got lots and lots of options when we start talking about the future of transport, particularly basically from a vehicle manufacturer perspective, a service provider perspective, and everyone's perspective. What about this? How many of you have actually wanted a sauna, but your house is just not big enough, or you don't have the money to put a sauna into your home? With fully autonomous transport, you could literally call up a sauna. It can come outside your house, you could get into it for half an hour, pay the service provider, and leave. I hope you're getting the point basically on what happens when we have blank space as an autonomous service. And then last mile problems, 28% of all e-commerce costs come from the last mile, but we've got dogs, drones, and robots, so who needs humans any longer? And look at this one, this is from Ford. So this is kind of like the Atlas robot from Boston Dynamics, but now you can have a robot, or if you're Continental, you can have a robot dog delivering your parcel. Or if you really miss the good old days, basically you can have a Ford robot throw your delivery package basically into the bushes and then maybe go in for a good kicking. There's lots of things going on, and this is the future of mobility. Did you think it was this exciting? We have Hyperloops. This is the Zolaris Hyperloop. I saw it at Dubai Expo recently, and this is supposed to travel at about 600 to 700 miles an hour. Hyperloops basically are trains that travel along in a vacuum pod, or a vacuum tunnel rather. Now, we've got a whole variety of different Hyperloops coming through. We've got HTT, we've got Virgin Hyperloop and others basically that are sort of very busy building the future of essentially trains, albeit modern trains. And they might not like me saying that, but hey, it's kind of a train in a pod. However, when we start having a look at China, we see the T-Flight being developed. So in 2025, it's estimated they will have a T-Flight Hyperloop that can travel at around 2,500 miles an hour. So that's about Mach 3, Mach 4. Albeit that that's really its starting point, and these would start being deployed 2030 onwards in their case. DP World, basically, which is one of the world's largest port operators, are looking to build out Hyperloop networks in India. And the reason why they're looking to do that is because if you can connect Shanghai India and the Middle East with a Hyperloop, you can disrupt the logistics and cargo shipping industries because you can do this. You can now take a container at a port in Shanghai, move it at 600 or 700 miles an hour, the same speed as an aircraft, or at hypersonic speeds if you're in China, and you can move that container from one side of the planet to anywhere else on the planet within 12 hours. You can move it to the Middle East within about 5 hours, and this fundamentally changes the economics of supply chains and logistics because you can now move containers from one side of the planet to the other at airline speeds for the cost of trucking. It is transformative. Now, in addition to that, when you start combining autonomous pods and vehicles with Hyperloops, you can move from having a multimodal transportation system to a unimodal transportation system that puts the customer first. So I, as a customer, can dial up a vehicle, it comes to my front door, I get in it, and the only time I leave it is when I get out at my destination. I don't have to swap different modes of transportation. So here's a little video.
The Hyperpod is the long-haul vehicle of the Hyperloop One system. It is a comfortable and safe transport hull for passenger and cargo pods. All levitation and guidance systems fit seamlessly underneath. Secure airlocks are at each end. Inside the Hyperpod, passenger and cargo pods can glide smoothly at airline speeds right to their destination.
Everyone loves elevator music. Now, I was in Abu Dhabi last week and I ended up having to take the Sheikh Zayed Road down to Dubai to do some things. I was in a taxi for about 1.5 hours. Basically, the taxi driver turned my hair white because I swear basically he was doing some form of rallying. That's it. And another point in time, I had another driver actually falling asleep at the wheel. Now, if I had actually been able to take a Hyperloop, I'd have been able to get from Abu Dhabi to Dubai, the Burj Khalifa, in 12 minutes. So I'd have actually saved myself about an hour 10, and I wouldn't have white hairs any longer. So, when we start having a look at other modes of transportation, trucks, again, the same concept that we see being applied to every other kind of vehicle is being applied to trucks. So we have fully autonomous vehicles, basically some fully autonomous trucks. And we also have teleoperated trucks, which is kind of that middle ground, that transition from where we are today, basically, to fully autonomous. Ships as well. We have 24,000 TEU container ships that are starting to be that are starting to go fully autonomous, so drone ships. In addition to that, basically we see 250,000-ton cargo ships actually now starting to come through that are intended to be fully autonomous. Now, from a connectivity perspective, obviously we are connecting all of these autonomous vehicles not only to one another, but to the cloud. So from a security perspective, this is where we can use quantum key distribution to actually secure all of these different autonomous vehicles by using unhackable quantum technologies. And that's again a conversation for another time, but we actually have a way to address some of the problems that fully autonomous vehicles present us with. Now, when we have a look at the future of cars, well, they're going to be pods, but flying cars were predicted in the 1960s, but actually we're not going to see flying cars, because what we're seeing people taking drone technology, eVTOL technology, and then they're putting seats in. So what we really have is we have the fully autonomous electric equivalent of helicopters being created today, albeit with different shapes and designs. This is a concept from Aston Martin, but we also have concepts from Uber. When we get back to 2017, for example, we saw Volocopter doing the first sky taxi trials over in Dubai. They've since done trials in Coventry as well as Germany and Singapore. We've seen Lilium coming through in Florida in the US. So the eVTOL industry, flying taxis ostensibly, but is now starting to come through. We've got Sky, basically, which is a fuel cell based flying taxi, which takes about 6 passengers, but it can do about 400 kilometers. And just to sort of get a little bit of a taste, basically, for what these flying taxis will actually start looking like, we've got these flying taxi stations coming through. So this is where your pod or you can just walk to a local modern equivalent of a taxi rank and get into your flying Uber or flying eHang or flying Volocopter or flying Aston Martin or flying Porsche. They're all at it, you get the idea. And this is then leading into this kind of issue that we have. So for example, if we have all of these small car-sized aircraft flying around our cities, we need a new urban air traffic system. So these are being developed in the UK, in Singapore, in the US, as well as in particular areas in China, because we need to be able to keep track of all of these small flying vehicles. I'm not going to call them cars. And here's an Uber concept. And Uber ironically sold their division, but I thought it was quite a nice little concept for you. So I love flying taxis. I've been in a few already all the way around the world. That's it. There is nothing like beating urban congestion by flying above it in 3D space. In addition to that, when we start having a look at other aircraft technologies that are coming through, this is the X-37B from NASA and Lockheed Martin. One of the biggest problems that we actually had with supersonic travel in the Concorde era is that Concorde couldn't go supersonic over land because of the noise that it made, the sonic boom. So if you actually have a look at this particular jet, It has a really long nose. This is the world's first truly silent supersonic aircraft. They want it to enter service in about 2027. We've also got Boom Supersonic, which has already taken orders from companies like Virgin Atlantic, for example, that can travel supersonic speeds across the Atlantic, so between London and New York and so on and so forth. However, as much as these are fast, we have faster aircraft coming through. What you're looking at here basically is the Hermeus. The Hermeus basically is going to be slightly odd in the fact that the USAF and the US government have already placed forward orders basically for a couple of these. This is the future Air Force One. So Hermeus is a hypersonic aircraft. It's powered by ammonia, a little bit like the Sabre engines basically that we see coming through with companies like Rolls-Royce, Boeing and others. So Sabre is a UK startup. Now, Hermeus is fairly unique in that it uses something called an oblique detonation engine. What does that mean? It means it can fly at Mach 17. So the future of aircraft isn't just fast, it's really fast. In fact, it's faster than a T-Flight Hyperloop fast. And then when we have a look at the interior cabins of future aircraft, on the one hand, we can just create massive LED walls that allow airlines to show you what's going on outside of the jet, inside of the jet. But in addition to that, when we start talking about virtual reality entertainment and haptics and all these other things, all of a sudden, if you're in business class, you can have a space like this and you can be playing virtual golf. You can have artificial intelligent assistants, personalized climates, and all manner of other things. You can even have what we call bio-optical sensors within the aircraft that actually pick up all of the different pathogens. Want to know if you're traveling in an aircraft today, basically that has COVID particles floating around, even though the air gets recirced every 3 minutes? Bio-optical sensors will actually tell you that because they glow. So when we start looking at the interior of aircraft, as well as all these other sort of vehicle concepts that I've been talking about and talking through, there's so many options. It's exciting. We also have balloons. So this is from space perspective. So it'll cost you about $250,000 per ticket, but this balloon, which will launch from Florida, will take you up to the edge of the Earth's stratosphere for a stratospheric view. We also have space planes. So Virgin Galactic have been trialing their space planes, and Virgin's Richard Branson went up in this recently. Didn't quite get to become an astronaut, which is sort of why Jeff Bezos has been poking him. But nevertheless, we have space planes coming through, which start opening the door to space tourism. And if you have space tourism, bearing in mind that we're talking about the future of mobility, you need to go from A to somewhere else, to Z. So when we start talking about space in 2025, companies like Orion Span are looking to create the world's first space hotels. Jeff Bezos wants to create the first space hotel as well. NASA have actually already turned the ISS basically into a space hotel. Many people don't know that, but it might not look that comfortable, but nevertheless, you can go and stay on the ISS, and a couple of billionaires have done so. However, when we want to get to these space hotels, a space plane isn't going to cut it. We need a rocket. Now, rockets can do one of two things. They can either take you from Earth to outer space to your space hotel, or they can take you from one side of Earth to the other side of Earth at Mach 27 speeds. So when we start having a look at that particular concept, we've already seen one company in particular flight testing that concept of being able to take you from one side of the planet to the other at extreme speed, but also up to a space hotel. Can you guess who it is yet? Future Travel. And the best thing about that technology, it's carbon neutral because the Falcon Heavy, the SN 15, 16, 17, 18s that we've actually seen flying around recently use methanol. And the way that they refine methanol means that it's carbon neutral. So getting from one side of the planet to the other in 30 minutes, I mean, that sounds like science fiction in itself. I can't get into London in 30 minutes, let alone anything else. So let's talk about the future of mobility and let's actually get stuff done. My name is Matthew Griffin. I hope you enjoyed the show. And don't forget, your next car, you should probably buy it because it can make some nice crypto for you. So thank you for watching and goodbye.